It is incredibly common for horror movies to end with a game-changing twist that completely upends everything we know about the story and, ideally, does so for the better. It's comparatively rare for the genre, or movies as a whole really, to get their big twist out of the way first, because after tricking the audience once, it becomes much tougher to get away with it again later on. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 more horror movies that cleverly start with huge twists. Number 10. Feast. You gotta hand it to any horror movie that throws convention to the wind in its opening moments, and that is certainly true of 2005's cult classic Feast. In one of the film's opening scenes, a man, Eric Dane, covered in blood, bursts into a bar before a title card swiftly introduces him merely as Hero, cites his occupation as kicking ass, and his life expectancy as pretty freaking good. Hero warns the patrons of the bar to do exactly what he says if they want to survive, and when they ignore him, he pulls out the severed head of a monstrous creature to make his point a little clearer. As Hero starts commanding the bar's now listening customers to start barricading the joint, they ask who he is, and he simply retorts in gruffly fashion, "I'm the guy that's gonna save your ass." No more than a second later, however, the window behind him is smashed by one of the creatures, which grabs hold of the hero and promptly decapitates him. Now that's a way to start a horror movie. Number 9. Scream 4. Though the opening to Scream 4 is somewhat divisive amongst the fandom, it does nevertheless follow in the series' tradition of delivering a wildly subversive pre-title sequence. The sequel opens with two young women, Lucy Hale and Shanae Grimes, being slaughtered by Ghostface in extremely typical fashion from the franchise, before we learn we're actually watching the opening scene from film within a film Stab 6, as is being watched by two other women. As the pair discuss the dire state of modern horror, however, one character stabs another, and we pull back again to reveal that this is a film within a film within a film. In fact, it's Stab 7. Stab 7 is being watched by Jenny, played by Britt Robertson, and Marnie, played by Amy Teagarden, Scream 4's real first victims, who are then promptly offered by Ghostface without any further fake-outs. Though some fans felt that this opening was a little too try-hard to be clever, on an initial viewing, it certainly caught everyone by surprise. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share and subscribe too. Number 8. When a Stranger Calls. Much as it may be something of a meme these days, the opening twist in 1979's slasher classic When a Stranger Calls has remained iconic for almost 50 years, for a darn good reason. The film follows Jill Johnson, played by Carol Kane, a young babysitter who is repeatedly harassed by a threatening caller, prompting her to call the police, who then trace the call. After another terrifying call from the assailant, the police call Jill back and drop a bombshell. The calls are coming from inside the house. It's a brilliant example of a simple yet elegantly executed opening twist which immediately unnerves the audience and puts them on an uneven keel for most of the movie's expectation-defying remainder. After all, this suspense sequence accounts for only the film's first act, after which it leaps forward 7 years in time as Jill is forced to face off with the killer once again once he escapes from a psychiatric facility. Number 7. 28 Weeks Later. The savage opening to 28 Weeks Later is so brilliantly, joltingly unexpected that, regardless of your opinions on the rest of the movie, it basically endures as a masterfully executed short film in its own right. As the rage virus continues to annihilate the UK, Don and his wife Alice take refuge in a rural cottage with other survivors. Their comparatively tranquil existence is derailed, however, when a terrified boy accidentally lures a rage-infected rabble to their hideout. The infected promptly kill their way through most of the survivors, and while Don implores Alice to leave the boy to his fate, she refuses. Don, racked by fear and sensing the futility of Alice's act, leaves her, fleeing the scene as both he and the audience are left to assume that Alice and the boy are killed by the infected. It's far from a gentle escape for Don though, who barely gets clear of the horde by commandeering a nearby speedboat. given that most horror movies quickly establish their protagonist as an upstanding or at least basically likable individual, for 28 weeks later to introduce Don as a man who abandoned his own wife to her fate hits like a hard slap in the face. It's a discomfortingly realistic outcome, even if most don't want to admit it. Though it's later revealed that Alice in fact survived the incident, the fact that Don fled the scene becomes the defining act that reverberates through the rest of the story. Number 6. Psycho. Perhaps the single most legendary example of a horror movie that totally blindsides audiences early on is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, which was marketed as revolving around Janet Leigh's protagonist Marion Crane as she fends off a murderous maniac in the Bates Motel. But Hitchcock skirted expectations entirely by having Marion herself not only die at the killer's hand, but die just a little way into Psycho's second act. Sure, it's not quite the very start of the movie, but it is just when viewers think that Marion's night of terror is gonna begin, not end. It's one of horror's all-time great OMG moments, leaving audiences completely clueless as to how the rest of the story is going to unfold. As it happens, Marion's sister Leela then arrives in town to investigate Marion's disappearance, and the rest of the unhinged murder mystery plays out. Number 5. I Saw the Devil. Kim Ji-woon's I Saw the Devil revolves around intelligence agent Kim Soo-hyun, who seeks to track down the serial killer who murdered his fiancée. Per genre convention, we, as the audience, expect that the showdown between Soo-hyun and killer Sang Kyung-chul will be saved for the very end of the movie, but that's not true at all. Rather, in an unexpected twist, Soo-hyun ends up catching and subduing Kyung-chul barely 1/3 of the way through the story. But it gets twistier still. Soo-hyun forces him to swallow a tracker and then just lets him go. Soo-hyun repeatedly captures and releases his nemesis throughout the rest of the film in an attempt to prolong his torture, though the grim flip side is that this also allows Kyung-chul to continue his killing. It's a total 180 from what most were surely expecting from the movie's opening minutes, ensuring that I Saw the Devil remains a daring and provocative horror thriller all the way through to its conclusion. Number 4. Alien 3. You are well within your rights to hate it, but Alien 3's opening gambit was nothing if not a totally jaw-dropping way to throw the audience off kilter for the ride ahead. David Fincher's infamously polarizing threequel begins by revealing that Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, is the sole survivor of an escape pod crash, which killed Ripley's fellow survivors from the previous film, Hicks and young Newt. While there were many fair arguments about Alien 3's opening undermining Ripley's quest to save her surrogate daughter throughout the last movie, it does nevertheless let fans know from the jump not to expect a purely crowd-pleasing, fist-pumping slice of entertainment like James Cameron's Aliens. Alien 3 is a decidedly more rough-edged film from its grim opening all the way through to its bleak ending. Sure, many would have loved to see Ripley, Hicks and Newt effectively playing happy families, but how exactly would that have operated within the framework of an Alien movie anyway? Number 3. Barbarian. The marketing for Barbarian was exceedingly clever in not revealing too much about what Zach Cregger's fierce genre debut actually was. At first, the audience uneasily follows a young woman, Tess, as she arrived at an Airbnb to find it double booked with a man, Keith, who is already inside. The horror genre being what it is, we're conditioned of course to be totally skeptical of Keith's nice guy front, which will surely give way to something far more insidious sooner or later. And yet, it never actually does. And in fact, when Tess finally descends down into the hidden bowels of the rental house to search for a vanished Keith, she's forced to watch as he's attacked and killed by the mutated woman living down there. And because this mind-melting surprise isn't enough, we then abruptly shift perspectives to the owner of the house, AJ, who heads there to make preparations for selling it. At this point, Barbarian's second act has only just begun, and yet the movie has already bamboozled the audience twice in quick succession. Number 2. 1978's Halloween. Second perhaps only to Psycho in the game-changing early twist sakes, we have John Carpenter's original 1978 Halloween, which unforgettably begins with the stabbing murder of Judith Myers, played by Sandy Johnson, at the hands of her brother, Michael. The chilling sequence unfolding as a POV shot doesn't give us a glimpse of Michael at all until the very end, as we're simply forced to watch him stalk and kill his sister in their family home. Only once the deed is done do we cut to Dr. Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, as he removes Michael's mask, revealing him to be a mere young boy. To have such a brutal murder be carried out by such an innocent-looking child kicked off Carpenter's seminal slasher film in immediately traumatic fashion, ingeniously toying with audience expectations of who can and can't be a horror movie villain. As origin stories for slasher antagonists go, there's arguably none better or more eerily shocking. And number 1, Nope. Hands up those who expected Jordan Peele's Nope to open with a grim view of sweater and shorts wearing blood-soaked chimpanzees sitting down next to someone it's mauled. Rather than get straight to the alien invasion shenanigans, Nope begins instead by kicking off a subplot revolving around an old in-universe sitcom, Gordy's Home, where its chimpanzee star went on a rampage and attacked most of his human co-stars. We don't get the full context of this visual until later in the movie, but it's an absolutely horrific and wholly unexpected way to open the story, I'll tell you that. Only in retrospect can we appreciate the parallel between Gordy and the movie's alien creature Jean Jacket, both of which forces of nature which humans have attempted and failed to tame with disastrous results. When we first feast our eyes upon that brutal scene, it is an epically disturbing curveball.